Has anyone here ever taken lessons on a musical instrument? So, Megan, what instrument is that?
The piano and the clarinet.
All right, the piano and the clarinet. So imagine if your teacher, when you had gotten to the point of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and you just started your journey, said to you these very words, that unless your piano playing ability surpasses that of the greatest piano players playing the most difficult music known to mankind, you will certainly not be a piano player. Do you think you keep flunking out Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star after that? What an impossible standard. And yet, that's the punchline that Jesus gives to us today about righteousness when he says that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. To that audience at that time, that was unthinkable. It would be like saying, think of, I'm going back in a time warp, think of, remember the days when the Lions had a running back named Barry Sanders, and this guy, it's like saying, unless you can run better than Barry Sanders, you have no business in football. It's impossible, right? And yet, this is exactly what Jesus says. Now, there's a couple interesting things that we need to keep in perspective here. And some of us have now lived long enough to have memories that are 50 years old or more. So for those of you, Dean, who in our audience, who may be of that age, think of an important conversation that you had 50 years ago. And that's what Matthew is doing here. It's been 50 years when he has recorded this. And so sometimes as we retell a story, we may also try to craft that into fit in with the times that we are telling that story. Because we're very early into the ministry of Jesus. Yeah, as a matter of fact, this is his second sermon. He's very early in his ministry. So why would anybody possibly think that he had come to abolish the law or the prophets? But that thought may have been very present 50 years later as people began to wrestle with what do we do with this thing called the Old Testament? And what do we do with this thing that we have with Jesus? And many of those debates kind of still continue today with how we put all of that in. And against that backdrop, we have the command to be salt and to be light. And I think that if we can figure out how to be salt and how to be light, that will answer the question about having righteousness that supersedes that of the Pharisees.
Amen.
It's kind of like, I'm going to terribly date myself, to the original movie called The Karate Kid, of this young boy who wanted to learn karate. And instead, he learned how to wax on, wax off, sand deck, paint fence. Do you remember that? And in this moment of explosion, he's screaming at his teacher that he's like, I've just been your slave. And that all I know to do is how to keep your car looking nice and to keep your fence looking nice. And all of a sudden he says, paint fence. And as he makes that move, he throws a punch at him and he instinctively blocks the punch. And he's like, oh my gosh, I have learned karate. And it begins to come together. And so in a similar fashion, when we look at how can we be salt, how can we be light, what are the characteristics of that, we find, I think, that indeed, that we can meet this very strict and this very stringent standard that Jesus has given us. And it is a high calling. At that particular time, there were 613 laws to follow. 365 of them were negative, with the balance being positive. I don't know about you, but if I'm honest with you, I have a hard enough time with the Big Ten. Add another 603, I've got problems. Big, big problems. Didn't have to amend that so quickly. The salt of the earth. And the light of the world. I began our service today by reminding us that Jesus was speaking to his followers, and he was speaking a fact of something that was already in place. Because we tend to think that maybe someday I'll be the light of the world, maybe someday I'll be the salt of the earth. But Jesus is saying, you are right now. You may not realize it, but you are. Grow into that. Let that flow through you. You don't need seminary training. You don't need anything else that you think you might need. You just need to be obedient and to say yes to Jesus when the opportunity comes to you. Our passage in Isaiah speaks blatantly against what is often taught, especially in the United States, of an easy believism. Believe in Jesus, you're going to heaven, congratulations, now get on with the rest of your life. And yet Isaiah says, if you want to be the person, and Isaiah is speaking from the Spirit of God, so it's the Spirit of God saying, if you want to be the person that I desire, the person that I deem righteous, there isn't a passive believism. There isn't the allowance to be the frozen chosen, but instead to be the one who sets the oppressed free, who breaks every yoke, who shares food with the hungry, who provides for the poor with shelter, who clothes the naked and does not turn people away. Those who do that shine and break forth like the dawn, and the righteousness goes before them. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God, right? This is what we are called to. And so it isn't a faith and it isn't an action. It is a faith that acts, and it acts with faith, grounded in that knowledge that Jesus Christ loves us, has redeemed us, and has imparted unto us as we come to him his light and his righteousness. There's a delightful passage that Paul writes saying that God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, so that we may be the righteousness of God. Have you ever thought of yourself as the righteousness of God? I certainly haven't. But this is the gift that we have through Jesus Christ. His life comes in to us, and it allows us to shine forth in ways that change the world and push back the darkness. Early in our married life, I wanted Tina to have a new experience. We went on a cruise. And it was a delightful cruise. It was along the west coast of the United States, so we went from Vancouver to Los Angeles. And we learned a few things about seasoning and a few things about light on that cruise. You can learn heavenly things in any setting if you open your eyes to it. So let's tackle darkness for a moment. As you may know, if you've cruised, you can have what is known as an inside passage room. It is the cheapest room on there, and there isn't a window at all. It is, when you close that door, you are in a cave, and it is dark as dark can be, except for the peak hole. And that peak hole is the brightest star you've ever seen from that. Should I tell the rest of the story? So, because it's dark and you just can't see, at some point, I was awakened frantically by Tina and told that we had grossly overslept and that we are missing out on all of these wonderful things on the cruise ship that was going on, and that the day had slipped by us. And in the darkness, I fumbled, and she showed me, she was looking at my watch, and it was upside down. And when I righted that, it was, honey, it's like 3:30 in the morning, so we're okay. You gave me permission, dear. But it was amazing at how bright in a dark place even the smallest light is. It was interesting to listen to various sermons and to read various sermons, and one person was just talking about this little light on their printer that, that's in their bedroom, and yet when they turn it off, it suddenly becomes a spotlight. A little light shines brightly in a dark place. We know that. And that can be true of our lives as we go forth into the world. Certainly also on a cruise, the food is well seasoned and quite plentiful. And you're able to enjoy many different variations of food and restaurants. And it is a wonderful, wonderful experience of the seasonings that we were able to enjoy. And I think that those examples can remind us of the blessing that we should be as we go out into the world. Maybe some practical steps for us. It's very easy for me to go home and not interact with my neighbors. And yet, I need to interact with my neighbors. Because how can a light shine if I hide it under a bushel and stay inside my house? For some of us, it might mean volunteering somewhere. For some of us, it also might include sharing of resources. For all of us, it means that we just don't sit still. And our ways to let our light shine are as limitless as the light is as it goes out. Cards, phone calls, visits, hugs, gifts, service, a kind word. All of these make a huge difference in the world. I'll tell you that during my time in my spiritual journey, I'm reminded of a particular time when there was a tragic death in my family due to an automobile accident. And it was so tragic, and it was so unexpected, and so devastating that faith came into question. Darkness settled in. And yet, in the midst of that, there were people who came to the funeral home and just sat. Didn't say a whole lot, but they were present the whole time. And it was their love and their support and their presence that shined light in a dark, dark time, that brought flavor to a world that had suddenly gone bland and hopeless. We have a tremendous gift and a tremendous opportunity to share the love of Jesus in ways that can far exceed our imagination. We need only say yes and then look for the opportunities as God gives them to us. I do want to just close talking about one other portion of the text, and that is, I think that we are to have our good works be observed, but not broadcast. We've all met people who will come and will tell you everything that they've done. I call it that they have eye trouble. You know, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that. And I don't think that's the righteousness and the light that Jesus is looking for. It is not the light of ego. It is the light of love. And I suggest to you that our acts of mercy and love and obedience are to be observed by others and not broadcast by ourselves. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think that is what Jesus is also teaching us here. And so, beloved of God, this week, let us seek to be what I call Savory Illumination, to be that salt and to be that light, to be the messenger of Jesus Christ of grace and hope, that a world that is bitterly divided desperately, desperately needs. And we do that one person at a time. I think we all may have heard at one point or another the story of the person walking along the beach, picking up the starfish and throwing them back in. And the beach was littered with zillions of starfish. And the person was told, "You can't possibly make a difference." And the person said, "I make all the difference in the world to this one." let us make all the difference.